between the conscious and the subconscious. That's the critical factor of the mind, which is also known as the inner critic. Now, that critical factor creates that barrier. So that's why when you start telling yourself, no, I am enough, that critical factor goes, no, you're not. We have all this history from our youth, or we know you're not enough. And so that it acts like a little guard dog and just repels anything you try to say to it. But what happens in hypnosis is that critical factor basically goes to sleep, and you can start dropping in suggestions that land into that subconscious part of the mind.
This is Your Kick-Ass Life podcast, episode number 365 with guest Amy Smith.
This is the Your Kick-Ass Life podcast with Andrea Owen, a no BS guide to self-help and badassery. Because ladies, let's face it, life's too short for it to not kick ass. And here's your host, the girl who serves it up straight with a side of crazy, Andrea Owen.
Hey there, ass kickers. Welcome to another episode of the show. I am so glad that you are here. I hope this finds you well amidst 2020 as we start to wind down the year. And I have a special guest for you today. Amy Smith is on the show. For those of you that might be new to me or new to the podcast, Amy's been on several times, and she is my very best friend in the whole world. We go back about 11 years or so, and I'm excited to bring her on because she's talking about hypnotherapy, which is something that I really know nothing about. And she's been talking to me about it over the last couple of years as she's been in her training, and it is truly fascinating. So I'm pumped to have her come on and tell you about these particular modalities that could be of help to you. Also, we are still accepting applications for new private clients. If you are somebody who is struggling to set boundaries in your life, or if you really resonated with both of my books and want to figure out how to implement and incorporate those ideas and tools and advice that I give in those books, come on over and fill out an application. I also do much deeper work that's around shame resilience so that you can live your life from a place of your values and feel proud of how you're showing up every day instead of doing those things like perfectionism or people pleasing or numbing out and not reaching out to people when you need help and things like that. So head on over to yourkickasslife.com/coaching and fill out an application. You can either work with me privately or you can work with my lead coach, Liz Applegate. Either way, we'll figure out what is the best package for you, who is the best fit, and you'll be well on your way to kick off 2020 with intention and purpose. All right. I also want to give you a fair warning that really, whenever Amy is on the show, it's kind of a toss-up as what's going to happen. So we start out in true Amy and Andrea form, and we are having a quick conversation about tampons. So for those of you that might be offended by things like that, you might want to skip through, although it would be kind of weird if you were offended. I mean, hey, no judgment. It's not extraordinarily graphic, but just fair warning there. And that goes on for, 5 or 7 minutes or so. I think it's a little funny. But anyway, for those of you who don't know Amy, let me tell you a little bit about her. Amy E. Smith is a certified and credentialed life coach and hypnotherapist, masterful speaker, and personal empowerment expert. Owner and founder of Joy Junkie Enterprises, Amy uses her role as coach, writer, podcaster, and speaker to move individuals beyond limiting beliefs and sabotaging mindsets to a place of radical personal empowerment and self-worth. With acute focus on helping people find their voice, Amy uses her popular weekly podcast, The Joy Junkie Show, to address issues of worthiness, self-confidence, and letting go of people-pleasing to assist listeners in creating and living radically joyful lives. Amy has been instrumental in aiding hundreds of women in stepping into their authentic power and crafting lives they desire. She is a highly sought after for her uncommon style of irreverence, wisdom, and humor, and has been featured expert in Inspired Coach magazine and on Fox 5 San Diego. So without further ado, here is Amy Smith. Amy E. Smith, welcome back to the show.
Hey, I'm happy to be here. Yay.
Do you remember when somebody, this might have been a couple of years ago, I asked on Instagram, what do you want to see on the show? What kind of topics? What kind of guests? And someone said, anything you do with Amy Smith.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
And then we started our own podcast,
which was met with critical acclaim and then dramatically failed.
Well, I wouldn't say it failed.
No, it didn't.
But it didn't take off and become what we thought it was going to, what we were trying to manifest.
That's right. Which yesterday, as I was trimming my nose hairs, and then last night, as I got a tampon stuck and my husband had to fish it out, I was thinking, oh my God, I have so much material that would have been so great for our podcast together.
Because the people who might be new to the show are like, wait, what just happened? All right. For those of you that don't know, I'm not always the expert that you hear on this show. I have a different side, which was that podcast. It was a little bit of a departure from our usual, because your podcast, The Joy Junkie Show, that you co-host with Mr. Smith, which I think everyone should listen to if they don't already. You talk about personal development stuff, and I have guest experts on. Sometimes I do solo shows where we're talking about how to live a better life. And that show that we did, Not Another Self-Help Podcast, some people listened to it and they loved it. Some people did not love it.
I really think it was like one or two people who didn't like it. And
yeah.
And it's because we talked about a lot of stuff that you contend with that you just don't talk about with other people,
Well, these people might talk about that with like their best girlfriends.
Right.
Or their really close partners. But if you don't think farts are funny, or if you don't think trimming nose hairs is a worthwhile conversation,
or menopause, or middle-aged shit,
middle-age injuries, then don't go listen to it. But
Yeah.
if you want a good laugh, I still listen to some of the episodes for fun because they're so funny.
Right. Or like if I'm on vacation and you miss me, you just listen to that.
I do. I just listen to all the stories over there. But I do. If somebody really wants to just get to the hypnotherapy stuff, then you can skip all this. But I need to hear about this tampon getting stuck again, because this is the second time this has happened to you.
Yes.
And you said that's pretty good for like 2 times. And how many years have you been menstruating?
Well, no, 2 times. I was saying 2 times in 23 years that I've been with Mr. Smith that I've asked him to please remove it for me because my fingers
this
are
has
too.
Never happened to me.
It's my fingers are too short. I as we've talked about, I think I might have a long vaginal canal.
Maybe you just shouldn't put your tampon in so far that it's about to come out of your mouth.
Like that's why, so that I can poo and it doesn't come shooting out. I feel like I totally have just lowered the bar for your show right now.
Okay. That's how we got on the conversation in the first place about where to position your tampon on that particular episode. So Darlene will drop that particular episode in there if anyone is like, what? Because what I found out through my research, because then I thought I was putting in my tampon wrong all these years. The consensus was in my diligent Google research was that it is a personal preference how far up you put your tampon.
Yes.
Because for you,
I'm a cervix
sometimes
buster.
Only like you're a cervix buster, like cervix kisser. Only like an inch of string is showing. And mine, it's like the whole string.
Yeah. To me, that's a lot of trust that you're having. Like that might be the most risky thing I would ever have done. That's what
I am a high risk taker. So you got another tampon stuck last night.
I did.
You had to ask for assistance from your husband.
Well, okay. So I'm digging around trying to get it myself. And I'm realizing that it was like it was like, have you ever seen those things on like Animal Planet where they're like trying to test a monkey if it can like get out of the cage or something? And it's like barely close to getting it out. It was kind of like that.
Could you feel it at
struggling? Yeah, I could feel it. But it was completely elusive. And so I was like, babe, I have a request. So it was quite the debacle. And then I was just embarrassed. I was just so embarrassed. I couldn't stop laughing. And he was like, be quiet. Okay. You have to put your legs apart a little bit more. Cause I was like,
did you have a flashlight?
No, he totally was like, cause he does this when he does body work, when he's working on people, cause he's a massage therapist.
He does not dig tampons out of people when he's doing body work.
No. I said that wrong. What he does is he closes his eyes and he feels the musculature, so he feels the body that he's working on. So a lot of times he will just have his eyes closed when he's working on someone. So that's kind of what he did with me. So he's got his finger in trying to get it. And he's over, kind of got his head positioned to the side, eyes closed, like just really trying to feel it. And then he finally got it. And I thought he was going to pull it out like with a big show, like Simba being held up, like, yeah. And
like all triumphant.
Yeah.
Victory is mine.
Yeah. I totally thought it was going to be a victory situation. And he just left it. So it was like a little turtle head, like poking out. And he was like, well, it's coming out now. And I was like, oh, okay. So so I grabbed it, disposed of it, and laughed my ass off while I was in the shower.
Oh my God. Well, if his body work doesn't work out, which I know it is working out for him, he could have a job as an obstetrician.
Or, I mean, there is a total form of massage, pelvic floor massage, yoni. I think it's called yoni or yanni massage.
I've looked into that. We talked about this actually on the other podcast because of my overactive bladder.
That's right. How is that going?
We'll just turn this into not another pod. I feel like it's a little bit better, to be honest.
Oh, good.
Yeah. But I have to be careful when I'm on my Peloton. When we go out of the saddle, it feels, I need to take it easy. Like, it's not my 25-year-old pelvic floor anymore. I have to remember. But anyway, enough about bodies.
Yeah.
Let's talk about our inner body. You recently, well, actually it's been a while. You've been working on this new training in hypnotherapy. And for the longest time, when I heard the word hypnotherapy, I thought it had to do with giving birth, because there's a form of hypnotherapy that helps women in labor, correct?
Right. It's called hypnobirthing.
Okay. Yeah. So it's not the same thing. So will you tell us, like, from a layperson's perspective, what is hypnotherapy?
Yeah. Well, I've heard it described in a ton of different ways. The perspective of the school that I was trained under talks about any hypnotic modality is something that helps you change your belief structure. So even things like religion could be considered a hypnotic modality, coaching, NLP, EFT, anything that helps you change a belief structure can be hypnotherapy. But as far as what is actually happening, very, very simply stated, it's a slowing down of your brain waves. So if you're thinking about in our awake state, our brain waves are going at a certain frequency. So those are alpha, beta, and gamma waves. And that's in our waking state. There are different degrees. Like alpha is a little bit more meditative, but that's our consciousness as we're kind of walking around. Then you go through a brainwave state where they start to slow down a little bit, and that's called theta. And that is right before you fall asleep. And then when you are asleep, your brainwaves have slowed down to a delta wave. So the hypnosis is happening when your brainwaves are in a theta brainwave state. And that happens for all of us twice a day, very naturally, whenever we are awaking. So it's kind of like that groggy place when you're not totally awake. We've all had that experience. Or where you're starting to fall asleep and you're not totally asleep, but maybe you heard something else happening in the room, or the TV's still on, or you're still aware. That's essentially the place that we put you into during hypnosis. So a very similar understanding of that I think many people can relate to is if you've ever been driving along to go to your destination and you get to whatever place you're going to, but then as you've arrived, you go, holy shit, I don't remember anything about my drive. Like, how did I get here? Well, you were in more of a theta brainwave state. which it's not totally safe, by the way. And your conscious mind had taken over and was giving you the ability to continue, but you kind of have disappeared into that place. But for that same reason, I think it's one of the things that helps people understand that it's not that scary. It's not that different than simply meditation with a goal. There's a very specific thing that you're working on remedying. But I think what's really incredible specifically about that state of where your brain waves are is it essentially puts the inner critic to sleep, which is so incredible. So the stuff that we normally are thinking about throughout the day consciously, our inner critic is always chiming in, talking to us. Obviously, you talk about this a lot. But in that theta wave, when you're in hypnosis, it's like it kind of disappears a little bit and you're able to embed messages into the subconscious much easier. So I'm going to stop there because I've said a lot.
Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers inline and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/noise, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/noise to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/noise. It's hard to find a great mentor who can help me level up. My dream mentor, Shonda Rhimes. So I was really excited when I heard she has a class on Masterclass. With Masterclass, you can learn from the best to become your best. Masterclass is the only streaming platform where you can learn and grow with over 200 plus of the world's best. For just $10 a month, an annual membership with Masterclass gets you unlimited access to every instructor. And you can access Masterclass on your phone, computer, smart TV, or even in audio mode. I'm always looking for ways to be a better writer, so I took Shonda Rhimes' screenwriting class. It helped me gain concrete technical advice, including structuring, the writing process, and with shows under her belt like Grey's Anatomy and Bridgerton, it was so helpful. Plus, every new membership comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Don't wait another moment to start your learning journey with Masterclass. Right now, our listeners get an additional 15% off any annual membership at masterclass.com/Andrea. That's 15% off at masterclass.com/Andrea. Masterclass.com/Andrea.
Is it that the same thing, the theta waves happening when we are doing things like when we're in the shower or when we're washing dishes, or for some people it's meditating where things slow down and then all of a sudden we get a great idea or we remember something that we had forgotten before?
Yeah, absolutely. Most of that is we store stuff in the subconscious mind, and it's not always, I mean, if you think about the breakdown of words, it's below consciousness. So it's not always accessible to us in our conscious state. So sometimes through various exercises in hypnosis, you can extract that stuff. So if there's something that you really want to remember, you can do that. It can be dangerous though, because of how we can fabricate memories that aren't necessarily true. So there's a lot of there's differing opinions in the hypnosis community about memory stimulation, about bringing up stuff from your past, and that's the only place where it gets crazy. But sure, like downloads and inspirations and things like that have everything to do with how the conscious and the subconscious work.
I read about that, like when I was doing my extensive research for this podcast episode, questions I was going to ask you.
Oh my gosh.
I'm being facetious. But one of the things that popped up in my Google search was it was something to that extent of can hypnosis or hypnotherapy be bad or dangerous? And that's the only thing that I read about was exactly what you said, that there's some controversy in the industry about, because I guess that happened. When was that? Like in the 80s or something? That was like, it was happening a lot.
Yeah. They would use it a lot in like criminal cases. So to have people like remember traumas that had gone on for them, or things that maybe they saw that they couldn't remember that they saw. And it has since been considered, from what I understand, at least in California, it could be different in other states, but I think if somebody has gone under hypnosis to remember something or something like that, it's considered something that will be dismissed and not credible. So it can be sticky. It's also similar to the same thing that we observe in coaching, where there's a fine line between what's within scope and what is not within scope. And if it's something that is related to a severe trauma, there are some places that you can touch on that and work through some things. But you do also have to recognize that, like age regression, for example, having somebody go back to a specific age where they had a trauma and like relive it is a huge no. That can cause a lot of damage. However, you can do things like there's a modality called timeline therapy that's really fascinating, where you basically hover above the timeline of your life and you observe different things that transpired from almost like a voyeuristic standpoint. I think of it like in A Christmas Carol, when Scrooge goes back and looks at the various different places of his life, and he can kind of observe what that version of him needed and, what was actually happening. So you can do things like that, but actually going back and being that age can be really, really detrimental.
Yeah, that sounds a little dicey. Talk to us about when you were mentioning quieting the inner critic, because I know a large part of what you do is helping women feel like they're enough and getting past, and just a lot of self-worth stuff. Because what we hear a lot is women will say, I know logically and practically that, I'm a good person, right, and I know that I'm worthy, of course, but I don't believe it in my body. Or when I get triggered, I immediately go down into that place of feeling like not enough. Why can't I fix this? Why can't I overcome this?
Yeah. So this has everything to do with how the subconscious and the conscious mind work. So if you think about the mind in its entirety, I've heard differing percentages. The school that I went to said 12% of the mind is the subconscious part of, the conscious part of the mind. And 88% is the subconscious. Now I've heard also varying degrees, so much as like 5% is our conscious and 95% is subconscious. But what that means, how that is created, is in that subconscious part of the mind that houses our fight and flight response, right? Which we now know there are iterations like freeze and fawn and et cetera. But we're only born with two primary fears: the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. That's it. Everything else is a learned behavior. So if you have a fear of dogs, if you have a fear of what other people think about you, if you have a fear of failure, all of those things are crafted in the subconscious mind in an early age, usually around up until about the age of 8, and then continues. But those are when we're highly suggestible, because there is no critical factor of the mind until you get later on in childhood. So basically what happens is you experience life and your mind either makes a positive association with something or a negative association with something, but it becomes a known, right? So the mind registers it's either a known thing or it's an unknown thing. So let's say, for example, you learned at a very early age that dogs are dangerous, and you got bit by one. And so now in that subconscious part of your brain, you associate dogs with fear, they're dangerous, they're scary. So then you grow up, whatever, you become an adult, and you consciously know in that small conscious part of the mind, let's say 12%, that it's not going to hurt you, that little dog is not going to hurt you, even that big dog is not going to hurt you. Consciously know that. You have proof of it. There's a handler there. Like, you know that. But if we're talking about that percentage, it doesn't matter how much that little 12% knows, because 88% is saying abort mission, be scared, oh my God. So when we have those two things happening, where we consciously know something and subconsciously there's something that is fighting against it, that's called cognitive dissonance. That's when there is a mismatch to what we believe to be true and what we consciously know. So understanding that in the conscious part of the mind, that's where we have logic, reason, rationale, willpower. That's also why just like, I won't be afraid of that dog. I won't be afraid of that dog. It's not going to work, right?
Even probably like seeing or reading scientific evidence.
Right. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because there's no way that can trump that 88% that says, no, this is super dangerous. But in that subconscious, that's where we have our belief systems, our values, our habits, and all of our fight-flight responses. So that means that no matter how much you know it's a good idea to believe that you are enough, or you know that you should believe you're deserving of love, you get it, what everyone's saying on these podcasts. If you don't rectify what became that subconscious driver, it's not going to change. Now, right in between those two things, between the conscious and the subconscious, that's the critical factor of the mind, which is also known as the inner critic. Now, that critical factor creates that barrier. So that's why when you start telling yourself, no, I am enough, that critical factor goes, fuck, no, you're not. We have all this history from our youth, or we know you're not enough. And so that it acts like a little guard dog and just repels anything you try to say to it. That's why whenever we try to create change like that, that critical factor goes, no, we don't know how to be empowered. We don't know how to speak up for ourselves. We don't know how to believe we're enough. That's unsafe. It registers as unsafe. We don't know it. It's not okay. But what happens in hypnosis is that critical factor basically goes to sleep, and you can start dropping in suggestions that land into that subconscious part of the mind. Now, that's not the only way to break through that critical factor of the mind. Another major way is through repetition. So that's why we tell people you have to talk to yourself in this specific way.
Yeah.
But because we want such immediate results, usually what happens is we go, this doesn't work. And we stop with the statements. But if you keep doing that, if you have that repetition over and over and over and over again, finally that inner critic will go, oh, I guess she's serious. And it will allow you to drop it into the subconscious mind as a new belief. But we usually give up way too early.
Yeah. Well, how does EFT tapping fit into all of this? Because I first heard about this in the 90s and I thought it was weird.
Yeah.
And then I've learned a little bit more about it and have done it myself and found it to be helpful, and some of my clients do it. So can you just kind of give people a quick 101 on what it is, and then how it has to do with everything that you just talked about?
Yeah. So it would also be considered another hypnotic modality, and it is short for emotional freedom technique. And it basically has to do, it's based on the idea that all physical pain is a manifestation of some sort of emotional issue that has not been resolved or rectified. So it has a lot to do with the energy meridians in the body. And the idea is that we, throughout our life, throughout how we engage with people, through all of our stimuli, parts of our freedom essentially get stuck in those meridians. And so by tapping them with intentionality, with repetition, by delivering a different message, it starts to shift and allow the energy to flow freely, which then will help with a lot of emotional issues, a lot of physical issues, things like that. So it's done consciously. It's not done in a hypnotic sleep. I mean, I guess you could, but the power of it is in a conscious state.
Yeah, we'll pop a YouTube video in there for anybody who's interested in learning more about that. Okay, I am also interested. I have never even asked you this, so I'm genuinely curious, not just like, let's hear you talk about this again. I am super curious about handwriting analysis because because what does that have to do with, like, how do you use that in your work if you have it all? And what does that have to do with the subconscious?
Okay, so this is great because you gave me so much shit about it. And
I know, because it seems weird, and I've heard. I think I gave you shit about it because I've heard some pretty, like, just massive generalizations. Like this may not be correct, but it was something like, if the first letter of your last name or your first name is twice as big as the rest of your name, then you're a narcissist or something like that. I'm like, and I think I'd make my A kind of big, but it's not that big.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff that's like that, but that's one piece in a litany of other information that you can get from a handwriting sample. So to answer your question, the way that the basis of handwriting analysis and why it's a measure of what's happening in somebody's subconscious is based off of the ideomotor response. So have you ever seen where somebody holds like a pendulum or like a necklace and they'll say, okay, hold it over a pregnant person's belly. Mm-hmm. And they'll say, show me a girl or show me a boy. And then is it a girl or a boy? Things like that.
Yeah, they sell those at the witch store that I like going to in Greensboro.
Yes. Okay. So that is a method of how we manifest physically. It's an involuntary physical response to what's happening in our subconscious mind. So it's actually...
So is that similar to muscle testing?
Yes. It's
okay.
Exactly. Applied kinesiology, muscle testing. It's that there's something that's happening subconsciously that's manifesting physically, but it's totally involuntary. And I see it all the time in hypnosis. We do something called an ideomotor response where we have somebody, like, if you can see that picture in your mind or if you can feel that sensation, slightly move your finger. And you can tell because it's more of a slight jerky motion and it's not like a bring, mm-hmm. like a very conscious movement of the hand. So that's exactly what happens as we write, especially if we're writing something of merit to us or something of meaning to us. You can also kind of see this. Have you ever done this where you start off writing like a journal assignment or something and you start off at the top of the page being like all poised and kind of writing mm-hmm. well. And then by the time you get down kind of 3/4 or to the bottom, it's like scribbly. And that's when
I start skipping lines because it's just my handwriting gets like a little wonky.
And that would be really curious for me to look at because usually you don't start accessing that subconscious part till about like 3/4 down the page. So what I will ask people is for them to send me a full page of, usually I give them like specific journal prompts and then I can look at the way in which they've written. There are certain things like T's represent confidence and self-worth. So you can start telling if there's a lot of confidence issues, the I, the capital I indicates how you feel about yourself. So you can start looking at that. So, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to do with how people write their name mm-hmm. and the sizing of the letters, the spacing in between. O's that are open are usually indicative of somebody who has an open mouth and can't keep a secret. But you can also start working on certain behaviors. So for example, if you have the end of like a Y or the end of really any letter, like towards the end, that indicates if you follow through on things or not. So if I've noticed for me that I will sometimes just sharply end down instead of allowing it to go through. So I've been working on making sure that they go through because there's certain things that I want to complete, that I want to follow through on. So you can start changing your behavior.
So like a G or a J or a Y, you would look at how the tail is?
Yes, how the tail is. But there's so many things. Like one of the ones that I found really fascinating is everything kind of on the left represents self or past. Everything on the right represents future or others. So
I don't understand, like left or right, how does that have to do with handwriting?
So if I ask them, this is the placement of the paragraph on the page. So if I ask somebody to write, and they go all the way to the edges on both sides, I know they leave very little room for themselves, but they also leave very little room for other people. There's boundary issues hugely. So
I always go into the margins on the right. So what does that mean?
That means you don't leave a lot of room for other people.
Does that surprise you?
No, not at all. And so, but if you leave more amount of room on the left-hand side, that means you leave a decent amount of space for yourself.
Okay.
So yeah, it's really, really interesting. But that can play out in a lot of different ways. But it all has to do with your subconscious will manifest itself involuntarily in your physical body in various ways. So
interesting. That is fascinating. I'm glad you explained it. And in my defense, all of my O's are closed.
Yeah. Okay, good. But
I have a big mouth, but I do keep secrets.
Yes. You will have like various loops that are in things represent all sorts of different stuff. It's really, really fascinating to me. So we did a series where we looked at various handwriting samples, and there were certain things that if it's highly erratic and if it's it's called sinuous, it's up and down all over the place. It's like a refer out. This is likely some sort of psychosis or something that's very much out of your realm, right? Mm-hmm. So we're observing this handwriting sample and it's all over the place. And we're like, oh my God, refer out. It's Charles Manson.
Oh my gosh. So there was a lot of inconsistencies in the handwriting. Is that what you mean?
Yes. Yeah. Or instead of, there's a lot that has to do with do you write slightly upwards, or do you write slightly downwards, or do you write almost like it's in a wave? And if you write slightly downwards, that's usually an indication of depression, sadness, not seeing the bright side. If it's up and down, kind of like a wave, it can be problematic. And it's also, there's a collection of things that have to exist for it to be really concerning. And his was definitely all of the things that represented instability.
That's so fascinating. I noticed that I think our generation who really learned cursive.
Yes.
There are some letters that I write very different. It's kind of like Spanglish with my handwriting. Yeah. Like I have a combination of printing and cursive, which I think is probably a lot of people when we get to be this age. And I've noticed that some of my letters are different depending on if I'm in a hurry or not.
Yes.
And if I'm trying to write neatly for someone else. If it's just for me, it's going to be a little bit more messy.
That's really interesting too. So if somebody constantly prints, that's usually an indication of control, like really trying to control the situation. And what I've noticed is I will print only my notes for my podcast. Mm-hmm. The most of the other time I do like what you do, like kind of a cursive print hybrid, but I'm much faster that way. But I noticed that I'm like, oh, okay, well, that makes a lot of sense, because when I'm writing just a card to somebody or something like that, I'm not worried about controlling the narrative. When I'm writing my podcast notes, I want to control exactly the message that I'm getting across. You'll also see it in a lot of professions that have to be controlled, like law enforcement or medical profession, things like that. But there are things that are only indicative to cursive that you can tell about people, but there still is plenty that you can tell from printing as well. But most people have varying degrees of writing like that. And that also represents the state that you're in at that moment. So if I see somebody who has a lot of slanting down, like the all of the words are slanting down, I'm going to want to get another handwriting sample in like a week's time to make sure that we're not consistently depressed, that they were maybe just down at the time that they wrote that to me.
Yeah. So if I had to describe your handwriting, I would say it's bubbly. Does that mean that you have a bubbly personality?
That's funny. Mine is actually not as bubbly as you might think. Mine definitely has some roundness to it. Usually highly bubbly is more of a creative thing, like a real creative spirit. Yeah.
Which is you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Today's podcast is sponsored by MIDI Health. Ladies, are you over 40 like me and dealing with hot flashes, insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, some vaginal dryness, or weight gain? Don't just accept it as part of aging. These symptoms are often linked to hormonal changes during perimenopause and menopause. At MIDI Health, they get it. Their experts know what you're going through and how to help. MIDI clinicians are menopause specialists offering safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions. And guess what? MIDI care is covered by insurance. So stop pushing through it alone. Schedule a virtual visit and dive deep into your unique symptoms and health background. You'll walk away feeling heard and with a plan to start feeling better. Visit MIDI Health today and reclaim your well-being. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com. joinmidi.com. You know when you're listening to a song on the radio and you get the profound feeling that the song playing was written about you? Now imagine having the power to gift that same incredible feeling to someone you love with an original song from Songfinch that actually is written just for them. Songfinch lets you create an original radio quality song inspired by your own life and the people you love. It's completely unique, personal, and lasts forever. Whether your song is for Father's Day, an upcoming graduation, wedding, or anniversary, or even just a gift to show your loved one how much you care, start your song now to lock in one of Songfinch's top artists. I gifted Songfinch to myself, a song about my late father, and I'm so excited to play you a clip.
Flipping through the slides of learning how to live and how to love, and coming undone are father daughters without, so she writes it down.
One of my clients heard about Songfinch from this podcast, and so she had a song created for her son who was graduating, and she told me that they both cried when she played it for him and that it exceeded her expectations. For a limited time, Songfinch is letting our listeners upload their song to Spotify for free, so you and the lucky person you gift it to can listen to it anywhere, anytime. Go to songfinch.com/noise and start your song. After you purchase, you'll be prompted to add Spotify streaming for your original song for free, a $50 value. Again, my URL is songfinch.com/noise. Don't forget to share your song with us too. songfinch.com/noise.
Well, before we go, I want to ask you about dreams because you've been so helpful to me, even before, but as you've been trained in this modality about dream analysis.
Yep.
And I think one of the things, if I can prompt you a little bit, the thing that has been so helpful to me is when I'm telling you about my dreams, that they're less literal, which sometimes really scares me when I dream about people I don't want to be dreaming about, and more so what they represent to my subconscious. So can you speak to that for a little bit?
Yeah. So there's a lot of really cool things in dream analysis, but essentially what's the most important thing to understand is the same way that you go to sleep with, let's say, a cut on your finger and you wake up and it's naturally so much better than when you went to sleep. Our bodies will naturally heal as we sleep. And the same is true for our subconscious. So if there is a bunch of shit that you dealt with during the day, that you didn't have the time to journal about or talk about with a therapist, your mind, your subconscious will try to heal that as you sleep. So we have various degrees of dreaming where we start almost by like a sifting process of like what matters to my dream, what matters in my life. Almost like when you go through your mail and you're like, keep, toss, keep, toss, keep, toss.
Mm-hmm.
So you do that at the very, very beginning. And then you get to a dream state that is called your venting dream state. And this is usually about 90 minutes or 120 minutes prior to you waking up in the morning. And this is where your body is trying to process anything that you couldn't handle throughout the day. Now, if you have a lot of recurring dreams, it's usually indicative of something happening in your life that you haven't fully made peace with or you haven't rectified. One of the big elements around that is recognizing in your dream what age you were, because there are a lot of context clues that will come up. So was there a person in your dream who represented a specific time period in your life?
Mm-hmm.
Were you
or a house that you lived in at the time?
Right. Those are typically context clues. And what that usually means is either you were a younger age or stuff is indicating a different age. It's that something happened at that time that you still need to rectify or make peace with or heal. But as far as the actual content of the dreams go, in order for it to be something that your subconscious is trying to heal, it does need to be somewhat of a story. So for example, if you have a dream where you are only falling, like you're just falling, that's usually representative of something that you ate, some kind of medication, something that you drank. It's more a physiological experience. It's usually not your subconscious, if that makes sense. But if you're having a storyline that's happening, what you look for are the items that are literal, that are actually happening for you in your real world now. And then all of the elements that are representative, or a symbolic in some way. And then you look at how did I feel about these literal things and how did I feel about these symbolic things? So most of the time you can figure out based off of the emotion that you were feeling that there is something going on for you in that realm. So for example, last night I had this really, really crazy dream that I had to put somebody in, it was like a hot dog making machine. It was, it was a place I didn't know and it was a dude I didn't know. And I had to, it was basically, what are those things, those wood chippers when you put somebody through?
It was like a meat grinder?
It was like a meat grinder, but it had all these different phases. It had all like with this part, he goes and gets his arms chopped off. And then this part, he goes here. And then he'll eventually go through a meat grinder.
I have so many questions. Was the person alive that you were supposed to? Oh my God.
And somebody else was telling me that I had to do it. And I couldn't quite tell who they were. And he was really
I'm glad it wasn't me because you've had dreams where I've been mean to you before.
I don't even remember. So
it wasn't that long ago. I remember.
Do you?
And I wasn't even there, only in your subconscious.
But I'm still mad at you. So as I woke up and I was thinking about it, instead of going, who is this guy? Who was this other person telling me what to do? I went, okay, what were the sensations that I was feeling? Because all of that had to be symbolic. None of that's literal. So I went, okay, what were the emotions that I was feeling? Okay, I was feeling like somebody else was telling me what to do. I was feeling some sort of pressure. I was also feeling a shit ton of fear and anxiety. And then I kind of, as I'm waking up, I'm going, God, this is the fucking election. I have felt so out of control and I have felt frustrated and fearful and where are we going? And it's out of my control because this has been one of the things that I've been talking about with my husband where he's like, we did all the things that we can do. Now, everything just has to unfold the way it's going to unfold. But that's scary for somebody who wants to have control. right?
Yeah.
So dreams, just like pretty much anything else that gleans us clarity, just like reading your horoscope or getting a tarot card reading or observing your dreams, you're the one who gets to deduce what you deduce from your dreams. Like you're the one who gets to decide what was that meaning. And so for me, I was like, I think that's really what was going on there.
It's so interesting. And I think what helped me too is I can't remember if you told me this or if I read this in some research about how they've done brain scans and MRIs on people who are sleeping in different dream states. And the part of your brain of logic and reasoning gets shut off.
Right.
That's why our dreams don't make sense. That's why there's a freaking hot dog maker.
That's right.
Or like Abraham Lincoln is there and I had a dream that I was on a school bus smoking a cigarette with Laura Bush not that long ago.
Oh, wow.
It was a couple years ago. A lot of my dreams, and I think this is common, seem to point back to anxiety.
Yep.
And feeling super vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's where I have the reoccurring dream, which I also know is common, about being in school and not having studied for the test. So feeling ill-prepared about something.
Yes, I have those.
And wanting to put my best foot forward and realizing that I'm not going to. I also have dreams, a reoccurring dream. This is so embarrassing, that I'm in high school trying out for I've told you this, trying out for the cheerleading team. And I'm 45 years old.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And it's about feeling left out.
Right.
That I don't belong.
Right. And so I think sometimes we think if we have recurring dreams, we need to fix it, right? There's something wrong. We need to fix it. And that doesn't always have to be the case. It could be the same way we view emotions, where emotions aren't just going to stop. They ebb and they flow, and they're just there to give us a message. They're just there to teach us something. And so the same can be true for your dreams. Okay. What if that's just a little bit of insight around, oh, all right, I was feeling a little bit left out yesterday, or I have been really craving connection because we're in fucking quarantine and I would love to be around people. No wonder I dreamt about that. So instead of it being like, oh, I've got to fix, sometimes it's like, what's just the message I needed to receive today, or the healing I needed to experience last night?
Mm-hmm. I've also had it explained to me, this might have been by my therapist or it might have been you, saying that when we sleep, as you said, our bodies are trying to repair just like sore muscles.
Yeah.
And many times our subconscious has not caught up with our conscious and understanding what the reality is right now in our world.
Right.
And so it's essentially trying to heal. And that's why sometimes we might dream about people from our past or people who have passed away or people we don't speak to anymore. It doesn't mean that we necessarily need to pick up the phone and call someone from our past. It's just our brain's way of trying to file it away.
That's right. That's right. It doesn't know, the subconscious doesn't always have a strong grip on timeline at all. We do the same thing. And that's with experiences that we have in our adult life, where that's one of the reasons why I think this particular year has been so challenging for people, is because this new trauma has kicked up old trauma that lives in our cells, that lives in our subconscious mind. But one of the things that you were talking about the absence of logic and reason when you sleep is exactly what I was talking about with the conscious versus the subconscious. Logic, reason, rationale, willpower is held in the conscious form of the mind. If you're not conscious, if you're unconscious by sleeping, of course those things are gone. You know, those don't have any bearing there. The only thing that I would say to people about dream analysis is be wary of something that is telling you butterflies always mean this, tigers always mean this, or X's always mean. That's not true at all. It's completely relative to the meaning that you extract from it. And the most important element is how you felt in the dream. It's usually about an emotional healing that needs to take place.
Yeah. So it seems very nuanced and unique to each individual life.
Exactly.
So how do you work with clients in this modality? How can people come and learn more about you and the hypnotherapy?
That's funny because I don't do that at all, except for in my coaching practice, which is, so like on the outside, you wouldn't really know that I have all of these various levels of education because what I do is work in this enoughness, like you were talking about. And then how then do you communicate that with the world? Tough conversations, boundaries, communication, etc. So if you are interested in the work that I do, the best place to kind of get to know me is over on my website at thejoyjunkie.com. There's tons of freebies. I talk about it on my podcast, but I do have one specific signature program that I do. And I essentially infuse hypnotic elements and NLP and EFT into the coaching program that I do. So if you go to my site, you're not going to see, here's all about
just
dreams.
do hypnotherapy with you. Yeah.
Right. Here's hypnotherapy and here's that. I do coaching and then I infuse these pieces into it.
Well, we'll drop those links in the show notes, especially the show that you have. And I think everyone should go and listen to it because I think you're so smart. And everything I learned about boundaries and communication comes from Amy E. Smith.
Oh, thanks.
And best of luck with your future with tampons.
Thanks. I'm clearly going to need it.
And thank you so much for being here. It's always a joy. And I need to have you on more often. And everyone, thank you for your time. You know how valuable I know that your time is. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. And remember, it's our life's journey to make ourselves better humans and our life's responsibility to make the world a better place. Bye, everybody.
I'd like to introduce you to the Minimalist Moms podcast. It's hard enough being a mom, and the last thing you need is stress from too much stuff and an overcrowded schedule. For too long, I lived with the mindset that bigger was better, and the more I added to my life, instead of feeling better, I felt overwhelmed. It was time for a radical new mindset. Less is more. I'm not into extremes. I didn't throw everything away. My brand of minimalism is more about adding than subtracting. Get rid of the excess to make room for what you love. In other words, it's about living life with purpose. I hope you'll listen in and my guest and myself can inspire you to think more and do with less. The Minimalist Moms podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts.